Hey folks, Steve here with another Korea Fire and Ice video. We'll be looking at turn 7. I actually hope to get more done, but some of that, as usual, is not always in my control. Um, we'll see. I want to move pretty quick just so you guys aren't here watching an hour and a half of slow bits. I'm going to move pretty quick, and in fact, I've already done several of the first opening phases of the turn with reinforcements, which amounted to a few increases in support levels for the communists and one reinforcement unit. I've also done the uh, communist communications phase and uh, um, strategic movement. There we go. Sorry, long day. Okay, so yeah, so it's strategic movement, getting guys brought down south. And really, I mean, the situation is not looking good for the North Koreans at the moment. They have suffered some pretty gnarly losses, all things considered. Um, and just to kind of help put some reference around why I picked up the 5 victory points last turn, we picked off one of the objective markers in Seoul, not because we were necessarily going to be swimming in victory points. Um, and I'm cognizant of the fact that taking 5 victory points puts me in a new category for UN foreign aid, which would kind of be a bad thing for the North Koreans. Like if they're losing on the board and they're ahead in victory points, that just is going to help the UN player, right? That's how foreign aid and the victory point system work. But we need some victory points because we're probably going to get walloped some more by UN forces, and the real tricky bit, I think, will be that um, we didn't want to give up victory points before, but now that we have a little bit of a bank of victory points, it's almost like we have more replacements. We did get some replacements in our reinforcements, so for the North Koreans, it's like, okay, they can spend some losses on replacements, they can spend some losses on victory points potentially. That will at least give us a little bit of a buffer so that we don't uh, totally lose it. Now, the problem is they've got all kinds of problems all over the board, right? We're out of fuel, we're out of ammo, we're out of fuel, we got bad leaders everywhere. If we want to get rid of the lack of ammo or fuel, we're going to have to spend supply points to do it, and we don't have that many supply points. And supply points are really important for activations and ensuring that you can keep moving guys either in reserve movement or your own movement, uh, and keeping those HQs fresh. So it's like, they have to marshal their forces just so to stay in the game. What we want to avoid is losing units on the board. I mean, if we take replacements, if we take victory point losses, that's one thing. But we're going to need to maintain a decent number of units just so that we don't have situations where it's too easy to surround and eliminate them piecemeal. Because once that starts to collapse and starts to happen, it'll happen really bad, and we'll be left with not much of a communist army on the board, period. Um, and well, we probably don't want to deal with that situation, um, at least before the Chinese intervene. And what's interesting about the game is that, yes, there are ways for the Chinese intervention to occur based on game situations. But if we reach, I think it's somewhere in like early January 1951, if the Chinese have not intervened, then they will automatically intervene anyway. So I guess even if we were doing pretty good as the North Koreans and we stabilized, the Chinese would still come down and support. So need to figure out how all that's going to function. It is still very early in the game technically, so it's like, does it matter that I'm getting kicked back towards Seoul right now as the North Koreans? I don't know. Does it matter who has victory points right now? I don't know. It's obviously very early, and we're just now starting to push back as the UN, but still, I might add, a month ahead of time. Next month, we're going to be able to do an amphibious landing. And what's funny is, like, I might be past Seoul at that point. I might not even need might not need to do a naval invasion. Period. Um, Honestly, so I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But okay, I'm going to do the communist activations, and we'll see what they decide to do. I do think it may be better for them to pull back to some line of defense back here, and that may simply be a better option. And I apologize. You can kind of see where the maps are overlapping, and the plexi doesn't hold it all the way down. And then you have the dividing line here between the plexi pieces, so there's a little bit of breaking there in your image, but still looks good. Okay, I'll take care of that, and I'll show you guys kind of where things stand. I'm not sure that the communists are even going to try to do any attacks at this point. Their penalties and their overall support levels are so low that I'm not even sure it makes sense to risk a combat. I think they need to retreat. So we'll see what happens. Okay, here we are after the communist activities have completed. You can see I've tried to pull back a little bit, but there were some issues because units that were retreated were sent to their spent side. They could not be activated, so we pulled back where we could. You can see we're still maintaining something of a line here. Now, what is interesting is that depending on how the UN player moves, they have an opportunity to send this guy up this coast road into the backfield, but they're not going to be able to get, well, I don't know. It's going to be tricky. Because there's only so much that unit could do if it were activated. Because it'd be like, okay, we're going to go with strategic movement, and it's really important because this guy is so far north. We can do this. We could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now we could effectively cut a lot of these guys off, but then, conversely, it would be really easy to cut that guy off somehow. It would not be that hard to do. And the thing is, these guys are still likely going to stay in communication because of the roadways out here. So it's not like, I don't know. There's an element of this infiltration move where, like, okay, if you use strategic movement and you stay far enough away from the enemy, you could actually, like this guy could try to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He could get up here and start cutting some of these road lines, and yeah, maybe some of these guys would be placed out of communication if we moved up. Kind of hard to figure out just how good that is. The other thing that I'm realizing now as I'm looking at this overall situation is, I can keep pressing up against these North Koreans for sure as the UN. I could keep beating up on them, and I'll probably do that to some degree. But here's the thing that I was like, grand strategy, I guess, or strategically, maybe it's not grand strategy, it's a strategy. Next month, in a few turns, we are going to have that naval invasion, and when we do it, there's going to be a surprise action. So all these guys will get flipped to spent. We'll be trying to invade probably up here, probably. We could invade over here, but probably over here. And okay, once we do that, the whole reason why it was so potentially dangerous is like the UN forces came in through here, recaptured Seoul, and threatened to cut all these guys out of communication and out of supply, in big ways, from that perspective. And I think, maybe was a reason to stay down here and just hold the line, because it would mean more distance the North Koreans would have to travel to get back north of the invasion point. You can see my phone's changing its focus as I point at things, but they would have had a lot longer way to go to get back up here, where now if I do that invasion, it's not like we're going to threaten to cut off the whole North Korean army. They're likely going to be able to get into safety even easier than the historical actors might have had. So there's sort of that element, right? Like, maybe we should have stayed down here and we should stay further down here and just try to locally eliminate units, and then make use of the surprise later. I mean, it just is difficult to say what's better. And I think as I get into the UN activations here, they're out of interdiction. They tried to interdict a communist HQ refreshing, and they failed and went home. They don't have much air support left. They have one plane left in air support, but they have plenty of tank and artillery. So it's like they can still definitely operate for sure. They have an advantage. They have a numbers advantage. It does make sense to try to eliminate some communists where we can. Um, but that strategic thing again, like what good will it be if I just push these guys back, and I can't even invade Incheon because I've already taken it. So I just plop those guys down somewhere. That might still be valuable, but if the North Koreans still have a decent line and they've created some decent offensive line somewhere along here, then that strategic surprise is only so good. It's kind of weird, right? It's like maybe I should hang back a little bit and not press so close to Seoul, so we can build up some objectives, or we can do whatever we want to do. We do have an allied objective marker here in Taejeon, which we will probably try to get this turn, and blow open that part of the map. I will say, yes, it does make sense to put units in towns and cities because they are the road junctions. And due to the way you want to keep your guys in a line of communication, it is probably better to put them in there. But what you don't want to do is have a guy in a town by himself. What you probably really need is a buddy who can help keep one of the roadways open at all times. So, like here, we've got a buddy sitting on this road line behind, so it's not as easy to cut the whole city out of supply or out of communication, so that unit can get support. So you can't. I mean, the whole thing of like, oh, don't put units in towns or cities because then the opponent can place an objective marker. Okay, sometimes you have to put a unit in there, I guess, and that's what negates my gaminess that I mentioned before. But even so, I mean, if you actually want to defend that city or town, you're going to need to make sure you're covering the roads out of there, or else they'll get swarmed and surrounded, right? And yeah, this game has a very low counter density. You can only usually have one combat unit per hex. The most stacking is with status markers like this guy, who is a guards unit who is disrupted and has an incompetent leader. So all the stacking comes from status markers, not units. But I'm not sure how often we'll have like every hex of of the front line even filled. It'll be like every other hex is a unit some of the time, I think, and not one unit in every hex, and then you don't have there's always going to be a pretty mobile aspect to the game, I think, until the late stages. So yeah, I don't know. That's just some commentary there. We'll focus now on the UN activations. The UN still has a decent amount of supply to operate with. Uh, the North Koreans really don't have much supply at all. So not much to say there. I mean, things are going to fall apart for them pretty quickly. But okay, I'll come back after the UN activations have occurred. Okay, I did want to cut in and show where we're at after the UN forces strategic move. Now, we could have snaked some guys up here, but while it's an entertaining thought, right? We could slide up through here and cause some problems and cut those guys out. I think what the real problem would be is we could. Um, well, okay, I'm trying to think it through, because the line of communication works such that those units there in what would be the outflank maneuver here would have to be able to count 3 hexes back to a rail line. So it wouldn't necessarily be enough, a rail or road line, I guess, that can trace back. So if we zoomed all the way up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and took control of those areas, trying to understand, like, would they actually count as out of supply? Um, so if we did, this is what I'm the line of communication is blocked by enemy controlled hexes. Um, and we would have 3 hexes until reaching a road, railroad, town, or city hex. So if we snake this guy around and went through like so, it would make this town UN controlled. And so then, and because we would take this junction here, they would be not in command. We'd have to remember that this is UN controlled, and I think that's the problem. There's no control markers. So somehow I've got to remember that or use my own marker, which I can easily do, but that's not the point. So then it would be, could any of these other guys count 3 hexes to a rail line or road line that can get them to a supply source? So this guy could count 1, 2, 3, so he could do it. This guy would go 1, 2, 3, and that's not enough. So he would actually be out of communication. Same thing with this guy, same thing for this guy. And the only other thing that we would have as a way to deal with that would be to try to do some sort of reserve movement. But if they're out of communication, then they can't really do it. And I don't think there's anything stopping us from performing this move because again, we've crept up this way. Let's see. Yeah, they may move within 2 hexes of communist unit. So I definitely could go to that town. We didn't enter Azak, so we don't get a bug out marker or anything. So yeah, I mean that like that's a strategic move. We can take territory with a strategic move. Um, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how you want to look at that, but that was. I mean, there's almost no way to avoid it. It was like I couldn't quite cover every road line, and I didn't leave enough in the backfield. This guy maybe could have come over or should have come over, but instead I opted to put more units in Incheon and Seoul as a garrison. I probably should have, all it would have taken is to move one guy down here, and that would have kept this from happening. But um, I think this is almost a coup moment here for the UN forces because they're going to rip these guys to shreds, right? They're not going to have any support. They're at best going to be holed up in town, and they're going to get eliminated almost for certain. Maybe they have to give up victory points, but it's going to be hard to break out of that. And that's not even talking about what will happen here in the activation. So I think we'll do that, and that will be part of the strategic move. It does feel a little weird to make that kind of a move the way we just did, but I mean, it is technically allowed, and it if we're using the fact that we can't go north of this line because we've pushed up this far, this is still all legal. I was south of that hex row, so I can make that movement. And shame on the North Koreans for leaving that coastal road open. So that was a big mistake on my part in terms of the communist forces. But the Allies are doing what they can. The UN can do what they can. I do appreciate that the roads and the rail lines are so important because It does make you think about like how to advance. Like we're not going to trudge through the hills over here, right? This guy's stuck in the hills, but the UN forces don't want to go through it. They kind of need to go through the roads around it, and that kind of helps anchor the North Korean position a little bit. So that much is all kind of interesting to see play out in terms of the momentum and the movement and where are units getting to when hopping on a road and hopping off a road. That's all kind of interesting stuff here. But okay, now I'm going to do the actual activations for the UN, and we'll see what kind of bloodbath we end up with by the end of it. Okay, so the first activation involved the UNHQ, and we are focusing here because what we want to try to do is bring these guys up like so, because it's almost to the point where this HQ is, it's going to get harder and harder to activate this side. So we need to kind of flatten this out a little bit. So whether or not we'll spend a whole lot of supply reactivating, I guess will remain to be seen, but we have moved up. Now, the communists did do a reserve move, which when this unit came over here and cut out a supply, we took a unit that was in Seoul and sent them down to reopen the supply line. So sort of counter move, but that effectively cost the communists their last supply point for the rest of the month, and we've got multiple turns to go. So not good. Yeah, not good for the communists at all, really. So we have this guy is still going to be out of command and being attacked with a hasty attack. There's a deliberate attack here, though he will get some support, and he is in supply or in command because he can trace over here and up. We also have attacks here and here. Those are that's a prepared attack, and that is a hasty attack. And the thinking there is, and we're not, we're going to get some support, but for the most part, we are just going to continue to press the North Koreans. We're going to try to get up through here, and that will narrow the front quite a bit. We'll get to sort of the narrowest part of the peninsula in a lot of ways, and that may have an effect on just how much damage the UN can do. But I think this is a good basic, realignment of the front a little bit. This poor guy is a bit stuck, but we'll see. We'll see what happens as we can get operating here. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we get. It's like, man, maybe if I could have activated him with this HQ, I should have done something else there. But I don't know. It'll be good enough. All right, I'm going to take care of these 4 different combats, and we'll kind of see where the lay of the land is. These units are all pretty beat up anyhow, so I expect things will go very badly for the communist forces. Okay, so here we are after the UN activation, and things are looking catastrophically bad for the North Koreans. They, I think, have lost like 4. I'm trying to think how many they started the activation with. 4 or 5 combat units wiped off the map. It's real bad. It is real bad for the communists, and I think some of this is just coming down to like where and how. I mean, the UN player has so much support that it is overkill. Like I don't even need to fully calculate the odds because, as long as the UN can get a C support rating, I mean, they're just getting so many bonuses that it's not even, like I said, not even worth calculating, honestly. Now, the one tricky thing is I did activate the UN HQ twice, and I have restored it, so that's cost a lot of our supply. And we are actually, unless I accidentally overspent by doing too much, and I'm not sure that I did, I've used up a lot of supply activating and activating and activating. And I'll say, it seems like that means that I am way, way, way too trigger happy on support, air support, and supply, in the early parts of a month where I'm just shooting everything off from the first of the month through the seventh of the month. We're just using everything, and then we have these little tiny, you know, operations in the later part of the month. And that's purely player driven. Like a player could decide to blow all of their assets in that first week if they really, really wanted to. And I've done that for both sides. But if you were playing this opposed, you might have to, you know, divvy it up a little bit more than I have. Um, you know, there's nothing stopping you from blowing it all out that way, other than you want to have some kind of active uh, action on a regular basis, really. And so it's like, well, what are we going to be able to do over the next 2 weeks that are still left in this month? And maybe this is where the allies, the UN player, just sort of gets set up some more, doesn't spend, you know, doesn't activate anymore, but holds, waiting for that amphibious invasion to kick in. But then, the North Koreans are going to have to decide, well, what are they going to do about that? They don't want to stick around too long. I will say the fact that a lot of these units were disrupted. A disrupted unit is so easily destroyed because it can't retreat. If you've locked it, if you've even, I mean, it's just really bad. That's all I'll say. They can't even retreat at all. So if they can't retreat and you do a maximum spread of damage, they're gonna take one replacement point. They're gonna have to give up some victory points, and then um, that's it. And if they can't do anything more, then you just have to eliminate the unit. And that's really, I think, the key part of the whole loss with combat loss maximum thing is like, hey, if eliminating the one unit or all the units in the combat will satisfy the losses, sometimes you have to do that because there's no other way to get to 5 and you have to lose it. Now, a couple of interesting things did happen. We had our first random event of the game where both players rolled 4s, and what ended up occurring is that the defender got to pull a snafu cup chit, and it was the communists. They pulled a low ammo, and so they got to pick low ammo versus no ammo, which is kind of pick your poison there. But it has so far just been a complete nightmare, where units aren't even being routed; they're just being totally destroyed, because those units that get cut off can't get support, and they can't retreat because they're Zoc locked, and even the victory points won't make a difference. So you kind of want to hold on to some victory points, so that units that can retreat or won't be eliminated can soften the blow a little bit. But we just had like here and here just units being completely removed, completely cut off and completely removed, and we didn't really have any supply that it was going to be worth activating units to try to save them. If we had activated one of these HQs and moved some unit forward to try to help support that combat, I mean, it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference. And then that same unit that just spent itself trying to support will get chewed up next. You're next in the snake's mouth, so to speak. So really, really bad operationally on the map for the North Koreans right now. They are getting chewed up, and the preponderance of force that the UN player has and being able to maneuver in around units is just unreal and very good. And even if the communists overextended themselves to try to do the same thing, which they could try, they might at best pick off one unit and then still get mauled by the units that are coming from behind with these UN forces. So we've put this guy back in as supply and communication as the UN player. I mean, it's just coming up all good for the UN, and that's the way it's supposed to be. I realize at this point in the game, or roughly this point of the game. Again, we're a month early, and I had just made some bad decisions, I think, as the communist. And I think this all comes back to my hubris in the first turn, where I said, hey, I'm going to activate these units individually to try to clear the way and do different things. I should not have done that. What I should have done, as was advised, was to activate multiple units at once so that we could surround the South Korean units and annihilate them completely so that there was nothing to slow us down and we could get all the way down here very easily. And maybe even, I mean, we probably got to Busan as fast as we could, maybe, but maybe we would have gotten down here even faster and just would have been in better shape, sort of holding the line down and around the actual perimeter than where we kind of left all this out and we never shut this area down. And now that's come back to bite us, right? Because we're getting kicked back up to Seoul already. But yeah, so there you go. The North Koreans are definitely playing that cry bully card, right? They instigated a bad action. They thought they were tough stuff and could shit on the South Koreans. But then somebody hit back and they're hitting back really hard. So now the North Koreans are going to have to cry and moan about getting picked on, and the Chinese and Soviets are going to have to bail them out. That's what's going to have to happen now, and the communists need to figure out how to get the foreign intervention engaged in such a way that will actually happen. Okay, so that's it, I think, for that turn, because we're at the end of the UN stuff. So eliminate friendly units. I don't think there's any reason for anyone to do that. I think we are going to have the UN player reveal this objective in Daejeon. It is 3 victory points, so they will be happy for that. And the communists, I mean, technically the communists should go first, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. They're going to claim a victory point over here. They're going to claim 3 victory points. So the victory points are now at 6 for the communists because they need something to cushion their losses. But the UN player has revealed their objective that they took in Daejeon. So you could kind of see that as, okay, the objective markers are currently operating as expected or needed or designed, even with my quibbles over what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. We're at least trying to make it work. So there you go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get things set up for the next turn. I guess this would be turn 8, wouldn't it? Is it turn 8? I think it is turn 8. Okay. Let's take care of it. Okay, so we are looking at turn 8, and I went through everything up to the communist refresh phase because I figured less talky, more play, right? Situation's not good. The communists did spend a replacement point to build a unit, and he's working his way down the peninsula, but everything else, we tried to strat move what we could. We activated units. In some places, we removed the displacement marker, or the disrupted marker, rather. And we've tried to pull back in a couple of places, but gosh, we really don't have very many options. If you're disrupted, you can't retreat when you get attacked later, so it's almost like pulling back while you're disrupted is not a good idea. But, you got to pull back in some places, and if you remove your disrupted marker, you're still liable to get surrounded and beat up. So it's really kind of hard. Like, here's what I think is going to happen. Like, this guy's going to go room, and this guy's screwed, is basically what's going to happen. And I don't know any other way to deal with it. They're just going to get popped and beat up until there's no tomorrow. I mean, when you just look at how many units are actually in the dead pile for the communists now, it's a bloodbath. So, yeah, there was no reinforcements this turn. So like I said, the communists spent a replacement point to rebuild the unit. They've tried to pull back where they can. They're still suffering from a lot of debilitating issues. And we're going to kick it over to the UN activations now. So I'm going to take care of their strategic movement. The new, furthest ahead they can move is this line, which isn't that far from where units are at. So strategic movement is now mattering a whole lot less. But what really matters is going to be, what is really going to matter is going to be the operational movement and deciding how far do we want to go. There's sort of a bottleneck right here because we can't get too far in some of these places now, but this guy is not needed to hold any guys at bay for supply purposes. So he can probably come up over here. These guys are going to come up through here. So yeah, it won't be long now. Like I said, it's not even September, and we're probably going to be up near Seoul by the time that invasion occurs. So it's going to be all chaos from here on out. Okay, so here we are at the end of turn 8 already. The UN destroyed another set of communist units, and you can see we're pushing our front line to not terribly far from Seoul. We're pushing back units over here, eliminating and progressing forward. And overall, the UN forces are in pretty good shape, but both sides are pretty much out of supply at the moment. So there's just not a whole lot more for them to do. We have had just total mastery of support in every combat the UN has had, because they can just cut off the communists from being able to use support. Because again, I assume if you surround a unit and the Zocs surround it, it doesn't have a line of communication to get artillery or tank support. And so they just get swamped. They just get totally ripped apart. And that's just the way it's been going. Very bad. With the victory point stuff, the UN player could pick up a victory point over here, but they don't mind the communist victory points being a little ahead for foreign aid purposes. So what they chose to do is to place one on this town that has a communist unit in it. So they have an objective marker placed there. They will almost certainly take it next turn. The communists decided to pick up a victory point. And actually, I had it do the wrong one. I'll have to put this one back. We would do this one, I guess, for a victory point. Because it's now difficult for us to pick up the objectives in Seoul, because there's now a UN unit within 3 hexes of them, which means we can't pick them up. So yeah, maybe the whole stashing them in Seoul was a okay idea if only I had been able to hold Seoul for longer than I can. And now, the UN forces are getting set up where, I mean, yeah, they can kind of place them locally, reveal them, move on, and they'll be able to pick these guys up at their leisure, so that, basically they can deprive the communists of foreign aid for as long as possible, and then have an avalanche of points that they can be distributing pretty solidly. So this is kind of where I'd be like, okay, I need to keep my communist units out of towns, or else I'm going to give the UN player a bunch of victory points over time. So I still feel funky about this. I don't know what to think about it. But we're going, and at least for the UN now, they can operate on the objective markers in a coherent way that makes sense, I think, the way the game intended it, which is pick something nearby that you can get, that just within a certain, distance of your guys. Say, that's my objective, I'm going to capture that. We fight for it. I get it, I reveal it, and I'll pick it up for points later, and we keep moving. And that, somehow is representing the, hey, we're publicizing this offensive. Hey, we got it. Hey, look, we're doing good, guys. We're winning the war, I guess. That's one way to look at it. This video is probably not so long. I could entertain the idea of doing turn 9 as well. So why don't I just do that? Let's just do turn 9 and kind of see where things sit and finish out this month of August 1950. Let's see what happens. Okay, well, here we are partway through this turn. Turn 9, can't believe it, turn 9. The reinforcement stuff was pretty straightforward. The North Koreans got a couple of units that are going to start working their way down the continent. Not the continent, the peninsula. And the North Koreans got a little bit more replacement points. The UN got a couple replacement points, but then they have a whole other cadre and a Commonwealth unit coming in, and I decided to put them over here rather than in Busan, just so they're a little closer to some of the action. And you can imagine, like, okay, now the UN is giving even more forces on the board. Oy, oy, oy. We're gonna be smacking some guys around pretty bad. Oh, I did forget to do UN replacement. My bad. but I have done the communist strat move, and I mean, I'm not even sure there's anything worthwhile to try to achieve. We were just able to get, not you, we're just able to get some stuff situated where we're out of total, we're out of some danger with our communist units, but it's pretty gnarly. We have one HQ that's unflipped as the North Korean, so we could do some reaction move if we had to. The allies, the UN, have basically one HQ that they could activate. Well, really two, but that's a whole other story. It was basically, for a while, this guy couldn't even move because he was out of line of communication, so he just sits there. And the communists didn't enter the hex to displace it, so he just sat there this whole time in Seoul. Weird, but that seemed to be the way to rule that. So it seems like our main option here would be for this HQ to activate 4 South Korean units and have those guys start to advance, and that would be all that they would really do. For the communists, there's not really much for them to do in terms of activation. They could get rid of some of these displaced markers, and that may be what they decide to do. So I'll take care of that real quick. Okay, so here we are at the end of turn 9. Just that quick, guys. I'm just blowing through these turns now because there's not as much to worry about. General retreat. Most of these guys are all out of supply. I could not activate this HQ again, which meant I could only activate a South Korean HQ for South Korean units, and I didn't feel the need to do that at the moment. So you can just see, we're getting kind of lined up here. The different sectors of advance and focus, and then these guys are going to come in. I really couldn't activate them to come off of the invasion box. It's not even really the invasion box, I guess. I mean, it's the supply source box. So I think that's the way that works. So they're coming off. They'll come off and they'll back these guys up. But I didn't really have enough stuff to do, so all I could really try to do was strat move up, and we've done that. And we did, with our objectives, we did take this town. We revealed it. It's 3 victory points. Meanwhile, in Pyongyang, the North Koreans removed a blue objective marker from the capital. So you can kind of see, I guess, the shifting of momentum is behind the UN for sure, even when it comes down to objective markers, because now the communists can't claim victory markers down here anymore because we're too close to Seoul. Meanwhile, the UN player definitely can, decide when and what to do for victory points there, so not a big deal. Maybe I should have placed another victory marker down here, or objective marker there, instead of revealing. I don't know. But now we know we have 6 victory points right here that the allies are going to be able to pick up anytime they want. They can continue driving north and basically getting those victory markers in place. So I guess we'll see how the rest of this goes. But that's it for turn 9, guys. Again, I'm trying to move much more quickly through the turns if there's not as much to show. And right now, I don't think it's worthwhile to just show me obliterating these units, because it's like the calculations aren't even that interesting. It's like, okay, clearly we're going to have all of our artillery and all of our tank support that we can get for the terrain and the readiness, and that so overblows the North Koreans that it's not even a question. But the difference might be now we're coming into the city. There's more units. We can try to keep pulling back coherently and maybe put up a fight as the North Koreans, but at this point, they just can't do very much on their own. That's the reality. We are going into the September monthly turn with the communists still technically ahead in victory points, so not good for them, as the allies will get even more. The UN will get even more stuff. UN forces, even more stuff than they already have. So, okay, guys. Well, I think we'll call that a video. 3 turns in 1 video. That's some goodness. hope you're enjoying. I know by this point a lot fewer people are watching actively, so if you're sticking around and you're observing, hey, thanks for sticking around. We're trying to figure this game out. I think I'm getting it. I'm having some fun, but I mean, in some ways, it's like, oh man, we're just crushing the communists, and it's fun, I guess, to do that. But it's also not, for the other player, it's like, man, I can't really do a whole lot either. I guess that happened to the South Koreans, so I don't know. It's all balanced. There you go, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Keep gaming. Keep gaming. Gosh, keep gaming. There you go. Have fun.